My name is Jonah Jonathan, and welcome once again to the Jazz Musician's Voice. Today I've had the wonderful opportunity to interview a great saxophonist on the scene and really one of the most respected educators at William Paterson University, Vincent Herring. I've known Vincent for many years since I attended William Paterson University, and we sat down in his house up in Riverside in the Bronx to discuss many great topics, and we also talked about the recent death of Harold Mabern. So I really recommend you check out this interview. Please continue watching and stay tuned for future videos. We've got a lot of great stuff and great content coming out, so thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.
Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm here with the great saxophonist Vincent Herring. I know Vincent for many years. I was at William Paterson. He was a teacher there, and sometimes there used to be some really great jam sessions. So Vincent, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started on music, on alto sax? Tell us a little bit about your early beginnings.
Okay. Let me see. I grew up in a place called Vallejo, California. I was born in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. But before we moved to Vallejo, California, we were in Los Angeles, California. And I was supposed to start music on the violin. And for a variety of reasons, I believe financial, and the school district didn't have an extra violin. I didn't start in the 4th grade. It was later when we moved to Vallejo. I was in a gifted program, not as a musician, as a student. And that year I decided to sign up for a band. And I figured that I should sign up for advanced band, because if I signed up for beginning band, surely within a week I would have this horn figured out and they'd need to move me up, so I just saved them the time. Yeah. And so anyway, the band director, he tells saxophones, play your part. Then he looks, say, this section, play your part. He says, you play your part. I was like, I need a couple days. He's no, play your part. And of course I couldn't play at all. I just watched the other saxophone players put it together. I checked one out, and then I was just doing everything they did, but I didn't know anything. I couldn't play at all. So I was humiliated in advanced band and told I couldn't even enroll in beginning band unless I took private lessons from a local music school, which is called Dean Friedrich's Music Academy. And I started taking lessons there, and I was practicing, but my practicing was motivated by revenge. It wasn't really a musical kind of thing. And sure enough, the following year, my playing had improved, because at that level, nobody's really practicing. So if you practice, it makes a big difference. And so they put me in an advanced band. And once there, I began to continue to practice. And more importantly, I was listening to a variety of music. Now, my mother was a big jazz fan, and she played a lot of the stuff that we love, like Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, Horrace Silver, Freddie Hubbard, Joe Henderson, Ornette Coleman, Eddie Harris. She had a pretty wide spectrum of things that she enjoyed. And so, not that I was necessarily enjoying it, but it's what I heard all the time. And as I was developing as a saxophone player, it was kind of the beginning ages of the smooth jazz. It was new then, but it was going on all the time. And I just continued to develop, and here we are today.
Wow. So, couple things from what you were saying. it's kind of interesting, the revenge concept, because the whole story with Bird, getting the cymbal thrown at him. And then
I never thought about that, but,
yeah,
but you're right about that.
I mean, I guess that's whatever can motivate you to, at a young age, to really practice to get to the next level. But that's really pretty great that your mom was playing some like our real idols in the jazz world, and you later got to play with some of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
So when did you decide you were going to go to school for music, conservatory, and how did that come about?
Well, the first school I went to was Cal State Chico. I was in the 10th grade going into the 11th grade when they approached me. I forget where they heard me, probably some school jazz festival or something, and they offered me a scholarship, which is funny because it wasn't a lot of money to go to school, but nonetheless it was a scholarship, and I wanted to go, so I took whatever test you take at that time to get out of school. And so my senior year of high school, I didn't go. I went right into college to Cal State University Chico, and continued to develop and practice. I was really too immature to be in college, for sure. Excuse me. I was, but it was an opportunity, and got you out of the house, got you around new people, continue to develop in the music. So it was a lot of pluses also. But years later, having kids, and as concerned and as hands-on as I was regarding my own children's education, I didn't even let my son. He did a 13th grade, and he was a spectacular student right up the street here at Riverdale Country Day. And he ended up going to Phillips Exeter in New Hampshire, and from there Dartmouth. But very hands-on, and my daughter, I encouraged her to go to prep school. She refused, but now she's at Columbia in her senior year now. But no one was really in tune with education at that time, meaning my mom, because that's who was really making decisions. She was working a couple jobs and things.
Yeah.
So I went to Cal State Chico, and it was my first time being away from home, but being on a university campus at the age of 16, and I was a young 16, so it was a bit much. It really was. Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I went to an early college, the Simon's Rock College of Bard, and I guess you could be there academically, but there can still be the social aspects at that age can still be challenging, So after going to school, how did you begin playing with some of the masters? Let's talk about.
Well, first, I only stayed at Chico a year, and I auditioned for United States Military Academy Band at West Point, because as I read about all the legends in the music, everything was pointing to New York, and that told me I wanted to be in New York, and I had no way of getting to New York except for there was this Army band having auditions. I said, well, let me audition. So I was one of the finalists, and then they decided to fly some of us out, however many, maybe the last 10. And I won the position. So I left school early and went into West Point. And that was also a good experience. There were some musicians you might know. James Kamak, bass player. Yeah. James Shirillo, guitar player. And a saxophonist named Doug Lawrence. He's the main soloist in the Count Basie band today. so the band was good. You know, I was again extremely young. After that, I moved to New York, and I started working for a company called Penton Software, which was at 420 Lexington Avenue, the Gray Bar building. And at Penton Software, I used some of the skills that I learned in school. Computer technology was just emerging. The personal computer technology was just emerging. And Penton Software sold a maintenance program. For instance, once you entered the data, which was all of your inventory, machinery, and details about your machinery, how many man hours it ran a day, how many man hours, belts, filters had to be changed, and it would keep track of these things. And then it would say, oh, your machinery has run 500 hours, you need this maintenance. And then when you would use it, then you took this out and it would account for that. You need to resupply this.
Yeah.
It could be an app today, but at that time, it was a very expensive program, and we used to fly all over the country selling it. I remember going to Alaska. That was the farthest away we went, but it lasted for a while. And after work, I would notice these bands playing on the street. And I thought, wow, this would be great to do this, because I was really thinking about music every day and really wanting to play. And but I had lucked into this, fairly okay job,
Yeah.
And so basically, my supervisor at the time, she knew that I really wanted to play music, and I was sitting in with these bands on the street. So finally, they laid me off, and I had unemployment insurance. I was able to collect unemployment, and I just played with these bands on the street. And those relationships led to a lot of things. Most importantly, we were playing all day, just all day on the street, and I needed that more than anything. Mm-hmm. So we would play a noon set in the morning, a rush hour set, dinner time, and then on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we would have evening sets. Mm-hmm. So this was very good for me, very good for my emerging career coming up. And I did it for a while, and then work opportunities continued to come up. I was studying at the time with Phil Woods, and I would drive out to Delaware Water Gap to study with Phil. And I was just practicing and trying to get better. And the first job that I got traveling somewhere around, Europe and around the States was with Lionel Hampton's big band. I had other opportunities that I didn't take advantage of. I had an opportunity to go with Buddy Rich's big band, but I, for a variety of reasons, chose not to. Mm. And maybe 6 months later, I decided to take the Lionel Hampton band, because I figured you can't play on the street forever, man. As much fun as I was having, you got to move on with your life.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I stopped.
So the playing on the street, I'm pretty sure I'm familiar with that. The Central Park and the different playing long hours. Sometimes the money's good, sometimes not at all. But it can get cold, it can get hot. I think I even know some of the guys you might have been playing with, because I think I've seen a video of you and Charles Tellerant or something on drums, like Chris Potter and some of those guys.
No, we actually did pretty good. We ran it as an efficient business. I believe the standard, once I started playing on the street, was battery-powered amps. Mm-hmm. I took my American Express and bought a generator. Yep. And then guys brought out real amplifiers. So immediately our money went up because the sound was different.
Yeah, sound was better.
The sound was much better. And we had exceptional musicians. Dave Douglas is a trumpet player, people know now. Danny Sadownick's percussion player. Charles Davis, tenor saxophonist, who were really quite good then. And we rotated in different people. And it was a great experience, it really was. And it was hard to stop playing on the street. I remember the first job offer I had was second alto with Buddy Rich, and it paid $450 a week, and I was making more than that on the street. And that's why I didn't do it. That was one of the reasons, And in hindsight, you think, go play with Buddy for whatever length of time would have been great, but I didn't look at it like that at the time. And but I did go with Lionel Hampton, which is funny because his is an inexpensive job also. But by then, I just come to terms with it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you something. Like at that time, were you facing some of the guys doing the drugs on the scene, or where did you encounter any of that when you were in some of these groups? Because I know some of your peers, I've spoken with, and they're like, well, I didn't go on the gig because I don't want to be around that. You know what I mean? Like,
drugs are always around us in the music business, yes, in other fields also. So it's a choice that you have to make, and that's a choice that I made very early on not to get involved with it. I had people go as far as to put a Coke spoon at the base of my nose. And I said, no, I'm not interested, And so drugs are always going to be around us. It's just a matter of if you say yay or nay,
Yeah.
And so it didn't affect me.
So let's talk a little bit about your playing as a saxophonist. A lot of people have heard the influences of Cannonball Adderly in your playing, among others. Talk to us a little bit about Cannonball and the effect he had on you.
I would say, Cannonball was the first saxophone player that I was just like totally in love with. And I loved his sound, and I loved everything about his music, and it was just a state of jubilation discovering him. Of course, as you grow musically, you discover other people, and other people on other instruments as well. Now, it just so happened because in my career path, I worked with Nat Adderly, and having a little bit of a sound like that, and a little bit of that kind of attitude in your music, people give you a lifetime association with Cannonball Adderly.
Yeah.
But in fact, when I was working with Nat, I remember one time being at his home, and Nat had a box of tapes and later CDs of people that had mailed him these things nonstop, hoping to have a chance to play with him. And he said, you know what I love about you? He says, you feel like Cannonball, and you play, what did he say? You play with his style, but you don't play his notes. And that was his way of complimenting me, saying I wasn't trying to play like Cannonball. Well, in fact, I probably was, but just couldn't,
Yeah.
And I was trying to find my own voice. There were other influences. I really loved my teacher at the time. Phil Woods was a tremendous influence on me. Sonny Stitt, tremendous influence. Freddie Hubbard, McCoy Tyner. Those people tend to be favorites of people for a reason. And I just love great improvisation. And I remember the first time I heard Freddie Hubbard. I think I was 16 years old, and I had gotten my driver's license. And we lived in a place called Vallejo, California. And Vallejo's about I guess maybe 25 miles from San Francisco. If you had a triangle, and San Francisco is at this base, Napa Valley's here, and Vallejo's here. So you can go here to Napa, and there Vallejo. You can go Vallejo and then Napa. It's all pretty close. And anyway, I talked my mom into. I mustered up the nerve and energy to ask her if I could borrow the car, since I had my license. And I said, "You the one that told me to go hear Joe Henderson." And she said, "Okay." I said, "He's playing at the Keystone Corner with Freddie Hubbard." And she gave me the keys to the car, and I could go to San Francisco. 16 years old. And I drove to San Francisco and, got into the club. And Freddie Hubbard was so amazing that when I left out of the club, all I could think about was Freddie Hubbard. And not that Joe wasn't great, because he certainly is. But Freddie Hubbard was a very big influence on me and very inspiring. In fact, that night I remember saying to myself, "This is not inspiring, it's depressing," because he was just so good. I could never imagine having that kind of a presence on an instrument. It was incredible. And so, that was kind of the beginning of my hearing music and getting it in my system and wanting to play. And Lionel Hampton was the first traveling band I went with. And it was a great experience. My first time to Europe. It was very nice.
And you came around the time of what was labeled the Young Lions movement. Some of your contemporaries, Wynton Marsalis and
Wynton was a little before me.
A little older, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna guess maybe 4 or 5 years, because I was hearing him on the radio when I was in high school, junior high school, and there was of course a lot of publicity around Wynton and his brother Branford. And and I read about them everywhere, so I know about them. So I guess he's about 4 or 5 years older than me.
Well, I'm just kind of thinking, like, as you said, you came up at a time when the smooth jazz was really coming, and then all of a sudden there was a kind of return to the acoustic from the fusion. But I guess it was all going on at the same time. But just talk a little bit about what that time felt like to you as compared to now.
The music scene.
Yeah, the music scene, and I guess the guys, some of these real originators were still alive.
Yeah. It's funny because you don't think about who's going to be here and who's not, and there's so many amazing players that were around. Yeah, that's the last thing you're thinking of, like when we were playing on the street. I remember Woody Shaw sat in with us. I was like, wow. Of course, you can go hear everybody, well, not everybody, but there was quite some people living still, especially in the 80s. And I had a chance to hear a lot of people. And it's funny, when I first met Lou Donaldson, and he says to me, "Is that a alto saxophone case?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Do you know who Charlie Parker is?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You don't know anything about Bird." And I was like, I know 25 solos. He says, "You don't know anything about Bird, get out of here." And I was like, why is this man messing with me, And that was my introduction to Lou Donaldson. And the thing that's funny is, having heard certain people live, and I'll say Art Blakey's press roll and just his overall ensemble presence was so amazing that if your only reference to Art Blakey is the records, you haven't heard Art Blakey. And I know exactly what Lou Donaldson meant when he said that to me. And the same with Freddie Hubbard. If you heard primetime Freddie when he was unbelievable, and we use that word all the time now, but no, he truly was unbelievable. If you had a chance to hear him during that time period, and I mean hear, I don't mean hear it on a record, and I don't mean see it on a video, but being in that presence, you have no idea what he sounded like. So in one respect, this is the information age, but it's missing some things. You know, those kind of people are not around. And I think one of the biggest things between now and then is I can honestly say that there were some musicians that were so far above the rest, it was like you were just completely in awe. And now the percentage of musicians that are good players is higher, but there's no one scary out there. You know, it's no one that's just like so far above the rest that it's like you just have a certain type of respect and reverence for. There's no one like that. And there were several of them when I was coming up, for sure.
Yeah, I can really relate to what you're saying. Like, even with like Harold Mabern, if you haven't seen Harold Mabern in person playing the blues or playing something, or Mulgrew Miller, you know, for us students, we didn't even realize having him in the room in ensemble, whatever he was playing. I don't think you can replicate that on a recording or on a video. it's seeing it, you know. But I guess part of the thing of this series is to try at least to preserve a little bit of something for future generations, you know, 20, 30, 40 years down the road, who won't be able to see some of these originators or second generation musicians. But can you tell us a few like stories from the bandstand? I mean, you got so many guys you've worked with. I mean, Horrace Silver, Art Blakey, as we said, Wynton. I mean, the names go on. Tell us some stories.
I was never in Wynton's band. I did special projects with Wynton. I was a guest at Lincoln Center a couple times, but was never part of his band. You know, it's funny, some of the more interesting and colorful stories I really couldn't share, you know, publicly.
Yeah.
And, well, I'll tell you, I could tell some from Nat Adderly. Nat was an amazing musician and a very, very intelligent man, and he was pretty much a father figure to me. He really was. And we used to have discussions on everything. And I didn't understand at the time that he would purposely pick the other side of an argument, and he'd find out my opinion and he'd pick the opposite, even if he was in agreement. But he'd just do that and see how I handled it, you know, and because he liked to argue. And his son told me, yeah, he's purposely going against you like that. So we had quite some amazing discussions, and wow, I'll share one with you. Wow. I don't know if I should share this one, but I will.
Okay.
Wynton Marsalis and the rise of Wynton Marsalis, you know, whom I respect, and I can tell you right now he's a phenomenal musician, very amazing person. Okay. When I was working with Nat, Wynton said some negative things about Nat Adderly that really, really hurt him, and Nat was genuinely upset about it. and mentioned it to me on several times, and gave me a little background information on Wynton and Branford that I had no idea. And he told me, he said he and Cannonball went out of their way to help Wynton's father and a lot of the musicians down in New Orleans because they were exceptional and not a lot of attention was being paid to them. And they liked him, and he had these two little boys. And Nat said they babysitted these kids occasionally, and they always stayed at the Marcellus Arms. I guess it was a hotel that they owned. And then that's where Cannon and Nat would stay. This is what Nat told me. And he said, so he spent quite some time with that family, and it was, and they were special people to he and Cannonball. And for Wynton to say the negative things that he did about Nat Adderly really hurt him a lot. And for weeks, Nat was talking about it here and there. He would bring it up. And sure enough, we were playing a concert in Florida, and Nat had some interview, and I'm having lunch with him or something, and he said, "Oh, stay." So when I'm there, eating my whatever I was eating at the time, and the guys, asking him questions, and he says, "What do you think about Wynton Marsalis?" And I'm just, oh, this is going to be good. This is going to be great. And Nat said nothing but praise and talked about knowing him as a toddler and a very young kid. And he said all of this stuff and just praised what he was doing and everything. And so when the interviewer left, I was like, oh, what? I was like, I can't believe this. You gotta be kidding me. And it was very interesting because he said, he started describing the music scene when he grew up. He said, he and Cannonball went to Florida A&M. And who knows, the majority of the staff, if not all the staff, the faculty teachers, were black. He said Duke Ellington played a concert at his school, and he said the music director went out of her way to say he is not going to play that jazz stuff on our Steinway, and put a padlock on the Steinway piano and said Duke Ellington played a concert at Florida A&M on a tiny upright piano, partially out of tune.
Wow.
Yeah. And he said that's where it was. So he said some things are bigger than you, and he felt that the movement behind Wynton and with Wynton was more important than his ego and how he felt about certain things. And so that was why he didn't say anything negative about him, and that's how he felt.
Yeah, that's really stand up, and
It is.
For me, it's a double-bladed sword because I was playing classical music and I got a trip with our orchestra to see All Rise in Boston, and Wynton was playing, and that inspired me. Hey, I can do that, and I got into jazz. But then later, I would be in jazz history with Lewis Porter on a master's level studying, and be reading these hurtful comments that he made to Miles or to these different players, and it's a difficult issue because that's a dynasty over there, Jazz at Lincoln Center. You don't want to make an enemy of that place, but at the same time, it's sad that our poster heads of jazz would put down other masters that came before them. But
yeah, some of it can be dismissed with youth. Mm-hmm. And listen, I've done terrible things in my life, the little bit I've been around Wynton, I've never had a problem with him. He's always been a stand-up person. But there's that history, you know.
Yeah.
And he did it to Nat, and I've heard of him doing it to other people. And of course, the mouse things is very well known.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's really in his heart, and it really doesn't matter because, like I say, what Nat was looking at, he says some things trump all of that.
Yeah.
And he said he was so impressed with what he was doing and what he was generating, where it was going, that that was more important to him.
Well, absolutely. Well, thanks for that. And I know you don't have too much more time, but for I gotta get the saxophone questions in for the young saxophone players. What would be some of the guys you would recommend young players who are just getting started in jazz listen to? Who would be some saxophonists that you would recommend to them?
Oh, to check out?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because, as I was saying, this is my guesstimate, but like when I was growing up, if you took 100 musicians, maybe you got one special one, 5 that are going to be good, maybe 10 more really proficient, and the rest, terrible. And now you have 5 that are special, 25 to 30 that are very proficient, good musicians, and a high percentage that are still decent. And a few years ago, I was one of the judges for the Thelonious Monk competition, which is now, I guess, the Herbie Hancock competition. And I was one of the guys listening to tapes to whittle it down from 400 to 15 or whatever. And me and 2 other saxophone players, and we came to the conclusion that people were so proficient and so good that you can take out the 20 that we selected, supposed to get it to 15, the 20 that we selected and take the next 20, and there's no difference. So, I guess that can be attributed to information being available online, a larger pool of people playing, people studying education techniques, and it's just whatever the reason, the musicians today are there's a high percentage of them. But when you get to the core of it, the originality and the individuality, that's a whole nother thing, And
oh yeah, it's so nowadays it's so cookie cutter, especially.
It can be, but I think people are going to rise above that. All right, so some musicians today. There's of course my peer group, and there's some great players in my peer group. I really like. Where do I start? Here's off the beaten path. Jesse Davis. Jesse Davis is an amazing saxophone player. Gary Bartz, Bobby Watson, Kenny Garrett, Steve Wilson. There are people I'm not thinking of that are great players. There's an alto player I heard in Europe. It's really good. I can't recall his name at the moment, but there are some really tremendous musicians. One of my former students, Myron Walden.
Great player. Played a few gigs with him. Yeah.
I have another former student that's a female, Irena Terakubo. She's an amazing saxophone player. And I would have to say, the best female saxophone player I've ever heard. Not that it should matter, but she's pretty exceptional. She really is. There's some really good tenor players. Like I say, there's a high percentage of good players now. Who should you listen to? I think you should follow your heart. As you listen and hear people, different things are going to influence you. Some people are impressed by fireworks, a lot of technical facility and quirky, interesting lines and things. Other people are more moved by things that groove and have a certain feeling to them. People gravitate towards different things. And I would say follow your own ear and heart and not your peer group of what's supposed to be great, but follow what you really like and are interested in.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. I know this is very just a few days, but I know you knew Professor Mabern pretty well. Could you say a few words about Harold and your experience with him?
Sure. Well, first of all, Harold passing, it's a fate that awaits all of us. So I think Harold was 83 years old.
Yeah.
I had a chance to tour with him in Europe and record with him and play with him a few times. And I found him to be really inspiring, as a musician and as a person. He had some kind of quirky ways of things that he talked about and beliefs that he had, but he was a real original person. He was a connection to yesterday. He had experiences with everyone. If you had questions about what was it like to meet so and so or to hear so and so, he had perspective on that. He knew many of the jazz greats, and Harold was a tremendous musician and a great, beautiful soul, man. And so it's always sad to lose anyone. But like I say, he was on the planet for 83 years. I wish it were longer, but in that 83 years, he made it count. He really did, and he touched a lot of people. My neighbor down the street, Eric Alexander, we did a tour together in Europe with Harold, and he and Harold was his teacher at William Paterson.
Yeah.
And their friendship was very special. And so, like I say, he touched a lot of people, and he was definitely a special guy. And I feel, man, I'm a better person just for knowing Harold. Really, and I mean
Definitely.
that.
Yeah. Having some of those classes with Harold, I remember we had a whole 45 minutes about Eric Alexander. He would give lectures on topics, and he would tell. He would be so in depth. We'd hear. Another one was, did you know Joe Henderson knew 10 different languages? And jazz musicians are some of the smartest people in the world, and and it was just so great to have. And some people could do the Harold Mabern impression, but
Sure.
I was baffled by, after his wife died, how back he got into the music. All of a sudden, he was playing almost every night, and it was like he hadn't left at all. He was back to it. So I'm sure that will leave a big hole at William Paterson, and and we've lost Mulgrew and James Williams.
Each time one of these guys leaves, it's they've made such an impression and a special mark. Their presence will be lost. Today at the session here at my house, there was a tenor player, Alex De La Zara, and he's an exceptional player. And he studied with me for 2 years, and this year he started studying with Harold. And he had the first lesson with Harold on Tuesday.
Wow.
And that's the day he died.
That's something,
Yeah. And Eric wanted to kind of follow in Eric's footsteps,
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel bad for the little guy. He's such a talented, humble musician, and he's gonna. First of all, he's gonna be great because he's already playing great. He really is. But it would have been nice for him to have that experience. For his last 2 years to study with Harold would have been sweet. Yeah.
Well, Vincent, I mean, you're a very humble guy. I mean, wow, over 250 recordings as a sideman, you know, over 20 recordings as a leader. What are some of your future projects in the works? You have anything coming down the road?
Yeah, well, always got things coming down the road. I just recorded a new CD, temporarily called Bird at 100, you know, because it's 100th year of Charlie Parker's birthday is coming up. Mm-hmm. And it was a live recording made at Smoke with myself, Bobby Watson and Gary Bartz, David Kokoski, Yasushi Nakamura, and Carl Allen. And I'm looking forward to that project. I'll be doing some dates around with that. I'll be doing some with my regular quartet. Have some trips planned to Europe as a guest with other people. And go to Japan with Eric Alexander in next year. You know, I try to keep busy. I'm going to try to do something with this one student of mine, and there's also an amazing vocalist I'd like to do some things with, Paulette McWilliams. She's pretty tremendous vocalist, and I really love the way she sings, and I'm hoping to do something with her soon.